Ready to go yet, Aaron?
We certainly are.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome to this Australia United Arab Emirates Business Council and the Australia Israel Chamber of Commerce Internships Program, first ever presentation of the research papers. This was an initiative of the Australia UAE BC and the AICC, which we began during COVID, which was difficult, but we've been very pleased to have very high quality active interns in Eddie, Timothy, Yolanda, Bradley, and Angus. They've been working away on their research papers, which are based around the issues in economics and trade sense, and environmental opportunities and technology that affect Israel, the UAE, and Australia, and particularly things that we might be able to learn from each other and teach each other around things like sustainability, AI, tourism, agriculture, working together. It's particularly exciting because of the Abraham Accords that the UAE and Israel have been able to now work so much more closely together than they have in the last 70 years. And it's testament to the good decisions made by His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman Al Nahyan that he has embraced the Abraham Accords. And as someone who visited Israel myself 12 times over my lifetime and was chairman of the Australia-Israel Parliamentary Friendship Group for 11 years, and also began the defence dialogue between Australia and Israel. And now more recently, having visited the UAE many times as Defence Minister, started the Australia UAE Business Council. It's very exciting for us to do more than simply be a networking and business group, but to actually work on policy, whether it's our working groups, and our new working group is our AI working group, and our previous working group was on energy and sustainable energy. And the internships program will be an annual program to promote sensible economic discourse between the three countries. And we're asking university students or early career young people to pick a subject, research it, talk to interested and interesting people, and then present those research papers to the ambassadors for Israel, the UAE, and of course, and then do a presentation, which we're doing now, which is being live streamed on YouTube and is being recorded and will be promoted on social media. And the research papers will be available for people to view, read, and hopefully act upon elements of it that they think are relevant to them. So thank you all very much for joining us. To Eddie Lichtig and Timothy Muya, and Angus Brooks and Bradley Innes and Yolanda Logue, thank you very much for the work you've done on your papers. It's been a long time coming, this particular YouTube, but that's because of a number of issues, particularly trying to get us all together at the same time, but we've made it. And we're going to ask you to present on your paper, and then I'll ask you a few questions to tease out some of the issues in the paper. And then we'll move on to the next one, and we'll have a bit of a body of work and a description of what you've done, which hopefully you're very proud of. So thank you again. And thank you to Aaron Waters-Marsh from the UAE Business Council, who's put together this live stream. And we're going to start, before without any further ado, with Angus Brooks. There's Angus. Angus has done a paper on the fuel and security challenges and policy between Australia, the UAE, and Israel. Angus is a fourth-year student at the Australian National University, studying a Bachelor of Commerce and a Bachelor of International Security Studies in a double degree. He has a keen interest in international trade challenges and threats, with a particular focus on the business community and disaster recovery. There you are, Angus. So if you could unmute, and we'll love to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Aaron and Christopher.
So as Christopher mentioned, for my paper, I chose to look into fuel and energy security policy and challenges across Australia, the UAE and Israel. And it was a topic I chose out of personal interest in non-traditional security challenges. And I really enjoyed the research and writing process. So with the help of Sam Pearce, who I note is the Australian co-chair of the Business Council's working group on renewable and alternative energies, I came up with, I guess, a three-pronged approach to looking at the country's energy and fuel needs. So the first category, which looks at energy for transport, so what has traditionally been liquid fuels that are needed to enable the transportation of people as well as maintaining supply chains. The second category looks at energy for domestic consumption, so electricity in the context of domestic use in country. And the final category looks at energy for export, which is particularly important for resource-rich countries such as Australia and the UAE, as it's important for economic and social stability. So to dive in what was learned, so each country has their own challenges. So for example, start with Australia, we have issues with liquid fuel security, with approximately 90% of our liquid fuel needs being sourced from offshore, and a real lack of reserve stocks located in country. Our obligations as a member of the International Energy Agency require us to hold at least 90 days worth of oil stocks. And whilst there has been a bit of progress in the past year or so, we are still falling short on this. What this means on a practical basis is that it leaves this country in quite a vulnerable position to any supply chain shocks with regards to liquid fuel. Looking at domestic consumption, electricity has been quite a politically charged topic in Australia in recent years. It's been subject to some quite complex public debates, and attempts to resolve the issue such as the National Energy Guarantee, have often run into complex political hurdles surrounding the need to balance transition towards renewable energy with the need to keep energy reliable and affordable. Putting political complexities aside, however, it's undeniable that this shift is underway. Energy companies have been retiring older power plants as they reach the end of their useful life, and more are expected to close in coming years. This will ultimately force Australia to confront the reality of a future beyond the vast natural resources that have helped drive our economy for a very long time. And similar can be said for our energy export market, with increasing global pushes for sustainability and emissions reduction ultimately going to drive down demand for our natural resources like coal. Looking at the UAE, which unlike Australia has no shortage of liquid fuel, so liquid fuel security is not a major issue for the UAE, and neither really is domestic consumption. Most of its electricity is sourced from gas. The UAE's natural resources have driven its economy and allowed it to rapidly modernise, and so its challenges lie ahead. The challenges that lie ahead for the UAE surround mostly the need for it to transition away from fossil fuels. This presents particular challenges for transport and export. So if you look at transport, for example, looking at aviation, the UAE is home to some of the biggest global aviation hubs and some of the biggest airlines as well. Transitioning away from fossil fuel dependence is no doubt going to be challenging. With looking at export, the UAE, like Australia, is having to grapple with reduced demand for its natural resources as the world shifts towards more sustainable, towards sustainability. And this will no doubt have substantial economic implications for the UAE. It's very welcoming, however, to see that the UAE has a real strategy in place to actively work towards diversifying its economy, whether that be through tourism or foreign investment. If we have a look at Israel, so information about Israel was a bit scarce at times, as the country protects a lot of the information due to national security. This created, however, it's no doubt that Israel continues to be quite reliant on imports for its energy needs. This has obviously created some challenges for Israel historically. And whilst increased local supply of natural gas has gone a long way to help, particularly with regards to electricity, Israel is still quite vulnerable, especially in regards to liquid fuel. It does appear, however, to be something that Israel is taking active steps to mitigate through means such as building resilience into its import networks and diversifying supply chains, and as well increased use of alternative fuels in the transport sector. And just to wrap up, all countries do have similar issues, but there are also lots of natural synergies and similarities, particularly with regards to the transition away from fossil fuels. It's worth looking at these similarities and the approaches that all the different countries are taking and exploring initiatives that have worked overseas to see if they could be applied back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. That looks like a Parliament House office.
Yes, it is.
Who do you work for?
I'm at Senator Jim Mullins' office.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, give Jim my best, of course. He's a former colleague of mine. I recognise those blinds behind you.
Yes.
So, Angus, in your studies, did you find areas where you thought there were opportunities for cooperation between UAE, Israel and Australia, at least in terms of research and development or even the exploitation of sustainable energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Even more, I guess, holistically, I thought there was a huge opportunity for Australia in particular to learn from the UAE's approach. So the UAE has been very strategic in, it's very much recognised the need for it to move away from the status quo. And it's developed a very comprehensive strategy to get it to 2050. And obviously, whilst plans don't always work out, it is something that Australia has lacked, and I think Australia and Israel could learn a lot from the UAE's very pragmatic approach to dealing with its issues.
I think probably too it's easier to do business in the UAE and Israel in terms of government regulation because they have their own existential issues, whereas Australia has the luxury of being far away from areas of conflict. Do you think that impacts on the way we deal with regulation of energy versus the more agile nature of the Israeli and UAE economies and governments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Australia also has had the benefit of like you say, its geographical location and its proximity away has kind of it's never been an issue that Australia has, I guess, had to think too much about before. So I agree with you. That it is something that it is a reflection a bit of our privilege, I guess.
A good example would be that you wouldn't think in Israel and the UAE that they'd have less than 90 days of fuel stores available to them. But Australia, despite the fact that we're required to have 90 for our military purposes and others, we've very rarely reached the 90, right?
Correct. We're at the time of writing the paper, I believe we're at 75, but it does ebb and flow a bit.
Yes, it's a subject dear to Jim Mullins' heart, so I'm not surprised that you included it. And I should apologise, I called His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, and of course it's Mohammed bin Zayed earlier. Now, thank you, Angus. We're going to move on to Yolanda Logue. Yolanda has written about water scarcity policy and its challenges and achievements, which is particularly interesting in 3 countries with water challenges. Yolanda is a public policy and international relations student from the ANU. They are currently undertaking an internship with the Department of Education, Skills and Employment, whilst also completing their study. And their policy areas of interest include security, economics and infrastructure, and they wish to assist in developing international and domestic policy regarding social unrest and conflict. And Yolanda will also be undertaking a graduate position in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in early 2023. And congratulations to you for achieving your graduate position at Prime Minister and Cabinet. That's a feather in your cap, and you're going to present to us on your research findings, Yolanda. You have to take yourself off mute, or you're one step ahead of me. Most people are.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Aaron. So as mentioned before, my research project focused on the threat of water insecurity in the Middle East, along with the major progress made by both private enterprise and government in combating this issue. I think that this is pretty important due to the high cost of water insecurity regionally for both Australia and the Middle East, but also the major benefits of advanced waste management techniques commercially. As we all know, irregular weather patterns along with high projected population increases in North Africa and the Middle East could lead to a major humanitarian crisis. The provision of water and sustainable agriculture to areas with physical and/or economic water insecurity is essential to human life and regional stability. As I mentioned in my paper, one major precondition of the Syrian civil war was a drought which lasted for 5 years and displaced 1.5 million people. The failure of agriculture and influx of people from rural areas into urban centres led to increased unemployment rates and civil strife. So Australia also faces regional security issues in relation to water. So the threat of water insecurity is extremely high in some Southeast Asian and Pacific Island nations, namely Indonesia, Fiji, and Solomon Islands. So with rapid urban growth, droughts, continued natural disasters, and the threat of more people losing access to water is on the rise. The provision of technology and assistance relating to water management to surrounding countries is important to reassert our dedication to the region and our willingness to work with our neighbours. Actively assisting states surrounding all three countries in developing effective water management is integral to avoiding intra and interstate conflict, I believe. Furthermore, countries like the US, UK, China, India, France, and Italy will face moderate to high levels of water stress in the coming decades due to an inadequate water supply infrastructure, depletion of naturally occurring water resources, and extreme weather patterns. So water insecurity not only affects individuals, but has a major impact on the entire economy, including commerce, manufacturing, and agriculture. And as we can see from key conflicts in Europe and supply chain issues, the need for states to secure key agricultural outputs is critical to domestic security and reducing the cost of living. So there are a variety of businesses like Netafirm from Israel, Badger Farms from the UAE, and Australian companies such as Ghana Ag and FarmBot, who are at the cutting edge of water secure agricultural technology, pushing development in drip irrigation and vertical farming. As we all probably know also, California is not having a great time with their water scarcity at the moment. They're experiencing one of the driest periods on record, which is quite unfortunate, seeing as they produce a very large percentage of the United States agriculture. So previously the government, the Californian government, has reached out to Israeli businesses such as IDE Technologies to help design desalination plants, such as the Carlsbad desalination plant. As countries are unable to rely upon old agricultural techniques and are required to quickly implement new solutions, businesses in Australia, the UAE, and Israel are uniquely positioned to assist these nations in rebuilding sustainable agricultural practices. So the benefits of further investment into sustainable water technology is vast, and it includes increased regional stability and cooperation, as mentioned before, diversification of our economies, strengthening international reputation, and avenues for joint research ventures between nations. Research and development through our three countries through memorandums of cooperation and understanding could be mutually beneficial. Recently, the New South Wales government has signed a memorandum of cooperation with Israel in the area of water research and technological innovation. Similarly, the Al Dara company and Watergen have signed a strategic partnership with a mutually beneficial focus on research and development. So cooperation between states and businesses is important in the continued development of robust water management technology between our three nations. I have a few recommendations that I thought would be useful to continue this trend, such as the establishment of a Water Innovation Research Institute at a major university, similar to what they have in Tel Aviv University. Memorandums of cooperation at a federal level between Australia, the UAE, and Israel regarding water technology development would be pretty useful. Providing grants for businesses willing to work in collaboration with international R&D partners would also be great to see. Sponsoring individuals, academics, engineers, and scientists to engage with international water research institutions elsewhere. and for UAE, Australia and Israel to continue to develop memorandums of understanding and joint research projects with its neighbours, similar to what we established with Indonesia in the last 5 years, I believe. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Yolanda. It's ironic, of course, that Australians really led the teaching of Israelis how to do farming in dry land areas. And in more recent years, Israelis have been teaching Australians how to do pinpoint watering of things like vines in vineyards through Netafim. So the Israelis are very smart about how they use scarce resources. Do you think there's a lot to learn from the Israelis and the Emiratis back into Australia in terms of the use of scarce water capabilities?
100%. As you mentioned, we've gone from being a teacher to the student and vice versa sometimes, but I think that's part of a collaborative research effort. As we experience our own issues with water scarcity, and not currently, as half the state is underwater, unfortunately, but we can definitely say within 10 years we could be experiencing a drought or any other severe weather pattern. So it's pretty important for us to continue to listen to our partners in the Gulf states and Israel regarding their own development of vertical farming, strategic use of water when it comes to irrigation, like drip irrigation, and also our own technology relating to satellite feed and our ability to strategically water plants. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of cooperation and a lot of ability for us to continue to cooperate, which is great.
Australia already exports significant agricultural produce to the UAE in particular. If you're eating in a hotel in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, there's a 70% chance you're eating Australian produce, which most people don't realise. Do you think there's more opportunities for that kind of cooperation between the UAE and Australia in terms of trade? And do you see an appetite in the UAE for adopting Australian and Israeli technologies and practices in terms of the use of scarce water?
Definitely. I think a part of the UAE and many Gulf states pivot toward the future. And I think this, leads into kind of what Angus was saying, that there is a desire to try and diversify economies. And through that, I think that means reaching out, creating more interconnection between Australia and states that have been, very focused on a few key resources, including ourselves previously. And I think, there are many tech companies even outside of, water development, such as Atlassian and, other smaller startups like Canva. And there's a lot of innovation in the Australian market that I think is appealing to international actors and vice versa. I know that they've, the UAE Vision 2050 has been a big driving force toward creating a more economically diverse economy for the future. Yeah.
Well, your recommendations are very specific, which is excellent, because we really want things to come out of these research papers. So I'm sure we can put you together with some universities around Australia that are particularly interested in water. The Waite Institute at Adelaide University immediately comes to mind, because they've studied water closely for decades, and similarly the CSIRO. So I look forward to taking your research further. And from the state with the least water, we talk about water here a lot in Australia. As Malcolm Turnbull used to say, water is for fighting over and whiskey is for drinking. It affects everything we do.
Yeah.
Now, thanks, Yolanda. Now we have Eddie Lichtig. Eddie is going to present to us on Tech Alliance, how cybersecurity and artificial intelligence enable strategic interregional collaboration between Australia, Israel, and the UAE. Eddie's studying a Bachelor of Science and Global Studies at Monash University, majoring in Geographical Study, Sciences and International Relations. He's an avid interest in international affairs, particularly working for and advising politicians in Australia and the Middle East, and is currently working for numerous organisations and companies in youth, education, diplomacy, politics and green finance in Australia and the broader Indo-Pacific region. Eddie aims to create a platform for youth voices at the highest levels of business, corporations and government, which is a worthy ambition. So Eddie, please present to us on your research paper.
Thanks so much. I'm actually just going to share my screen very quickly. If everyone can see that.
I can.
Great. Okay, so hello everyone. Just a little bit about me. My name's Eddie, and I'm delighted to present to you this research I've recently been conducting into how cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, or AI, can enable strategic interregional collaboration between Australia, Israel, and the UAE. Now, why did I choose this topic? I chose it because I recognized that there was already a collaboration between various initiatives in AI between Israel and the UAE and Australia, or between Israel and Australia, or Australia and the UAE. But there is actually more significant need for all these countries to actually collaborate on a range of challenges and opportunities together. But also there is a need for Australia more specifically, there's a lot more needing to be done in what I called catching up with AI implementation with the rest of the world. And I actually explained at the beginning of the research that we live in a world with increased cyber attacks. We've seen we've had major cyber attacks recently in Australia, and Israel has to deal with threats daily, as do other countries. And the UAE actually just recently this week, they actually launched its second phase of goals within AI. And one of them actually has to do with developing systems aiming to adopt AI in government services. So this paper is very significant and very relevant. But more so, this paper is about creating a more robust and formalized alliance together, as is called a tech alliance, to create better business and better diplomacy. So this alliance, there are many benefits to it, as brought out in this research. For the UAE strategically needs to turn to more profound technological opportunities, for example, computing and blockchain, which is offered by Israel. The UAE and Australia represent also a market for Israeli technologies. And for Australia, as I initially said, it's an unprecedented alliance because it's an opportunity to technologically catch up with the rest of the world, and also to utilize a lot of these technologies that Israel and the UAE provides. And all three countries, it's actually a market for Israeli technologies, and each country can actually use each other as an excellent customer basis for trade and for market testing. On to some of the key findings from this paper. Just before the key findings, there were actually three themes that were brought out into this paper. One was that there's a lot of fear of the unknown of AI implementation. Another thing is there are a lot of challenges and opportunities for all the three countries in AI. And there are a lot of opportunities from which these countries can actually learn from each other. And that actually ties in well to the key findings. So the key findings, namely to demystify the process of AI through promoting ethical AI usage. Secondly, to educate about responsible AI usage. Thirdly, to promote multicultural awareness through ethical AI management. A fourth one is also about encouraging collaboration in AI through joint initiatives with startups. There are a range of different initiatives I talk to in the paper, from traffic to skin cancer initiatives to just developing AI in a range of different projects. Another key finding of this paper is investing in AI unsupervised learning systems. This is a type of AI which is not fully developed and has a lot of future potential. And so investing in that now means a future investment for all three countries. Another one is also guaranteeing digital sovereignty of AI. And the last key finding is taking bold risks with AI. And I just wanted to mention that bold risks for artificial intelligence what really came out in this paper and what we know is that the most agile and adaptive companies and governments thrive in taking risks, and governments should really be willing to experiment and be ready to move quickly with AI ideas, experimentation and implementation, but also be willing to take that risk. And lastly, to actually work together to take better risks and to have better AI and to have better AI communities. And just lastly, the recommendations of the paper. The first one is there were 7 policy initiatives. So demystification, education, ethical awareness, collaboration, investment, digital sovereignty, and taking bold risks. More specifically, the first policy recommendation, demystifying the process of AI through promoting ethical AI usage. There is a lot of talk about AI in media, in movies. I talk about the Hollywoodization of AI and that it's actually warped people's perception of what AI is. And so what could be a way to move forward from all this is for companies and for businesses, for governments to really play a role in demystifying demystifying what AI is about. And that can be done through a range of things, for example, educational trade missions, networking events, dual collaborative workshops, etc. And another policy I just wanted to focus on is educating about responsible AI usage. AI usage comes from the implementation of AI, but when there's such an array of different types of AI to use, it can be quite overwhelming. And so governments and companies really should be at the forefront of educating about how to use these technologies responsibly. The paper goes into a few examples of what the UAE is doing and how they're collaborating with Israel about responsible AI usage. And this is actually a way to guide people and companies about how to use AI properly and how to work with each other better. I'll probably leave it there. There were a lot of other policy recommendations that came about in the paper, but just some brief concluding remarks. There are obviously a lot of different opportunities for AI between Australia, Israel, and the UAE. There's a lot that is already happening, but there are a lot of strengths and opportunities that we really need to tap into and to realize that each country has. And there are a lot of challenges. And more particularly, Australia has the opportunity to really tap into its challenges and to learn from Israel and the UAE in AI implementation. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Eddie. You might want to consider providing some support for our working group on AI, which has just been established. We have co-chairs on the Australian side and the UAE side now, because I think your paper would be a good resource for them. And thank you for your contribution. I think when most people think of AI, or when you say artificial intelligence, of course, people immediately think of the Terminator, which terrifies them. When, of course, AI is an economic tool to do things better and improve human beings' lives. But there is an issue around its perception. So when you talk about ethical AI, the fact that we even need to talk about it being ethically used raises the hackles of people who think, well, how are you going to control countries or corporations that aren't going to use it ethically? There's a few areas where the world is trying to cooperate in regulation. Antarctica and space immediately occur to me. But how do you see the UAE, Israel, and Australia being able to promote this ethical AI approach, and what success do you think they might be able to have?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Notably, also the UAE just released its ethical research into AI this week, I think, from one of their committees in AI. And I think a way to ensure AI ethics is one of the things I talk about in the paper is when you promote AI, under whose terms is the AI, under whose values the AI being really produced. So I think one way to actually overcome this is to potentially even look into something like a digital sovereignty. One of the things I talk about is that the UAE is actually looking at is they're looking at building a digital sovereignty to be guaranteed. And what can actually come about from this is it can actually bring, like, for example, Israel and Australia together with the UAE to have some sort of technological framework or a way to guarantee different sovereignties and a way to actually export AI because of similar values that they share with each other. So I think by actually connecting people and countries that have similar values, especially with how they want to implement AI or they want to strive to implement AI, they can look to what the UAE is actually doing. And I think it's actually building, there's a company, G42, that's actually building a digital sovereign cloud. And what Australia and Israel can actually look to is actually potentially having this cloud to become a multi-layered cloud, and it can sort of become, I call it like an airport of multinational values, where all these countries can actually share AI and things can be guaranteed, and it can actually be a secured network of sharing AI responsibly. Could be one way to overcome that.
Is G42 a Emirati or Israeli or Australian company?
Yeah, Emirati.
An Emirati company. The Emiratis are very advanced on AI, actually. Tell me, do you see any examples at the moment of cooperation between UAE, Israel, and Australia around the development of AI in your studies?
As in right now, like things going well. There are initiatives between companies. For example, there are initiatives between Australian and Israeli companies through trade missions. And then Australia's largest trading partner in the Middle East, I believe, is the UAE. But if there is a more robust if there's an agreement between the three countries for the implementation of AI, or if there's more substantial sharing on a diplomatic but also security level, I think that will actually complement a lot of the things that's going on with business. So there is sharing of things. I know, for example, between Israel and the UAE, with the Israeli UAE Business Council, there is a lot of sharing and business that's going on. But I think Australia should jump in there and join the collaboration, and I think it will gain a lot from a lot of the technologies that are there for it to use at its disposal.
Excellent. Thank you, Eddie. That's great. I wish we could talk about these issues for longer, actually, whether it's fuel or AI or water scarcity, but we also have to hear from Timothy and from Bradley. So we better move on. So our next presentation is from Timothy Muya. It's an analysis of advanced manufacturing policies in Australia, Israel, and the UAE, which is particularly interesting. Timothy is an economics graduate from the Australian National University, and he's passionate about economic policy, business, and technology, with a keen interest in international trade and entrepreneurship. And Timothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Oh, you're going to share your screen as well.
Yes. So, yes, so my paper was on advanced manufacturing policies in Australia, Israel, and UAE. So what is advanced manufacturing? Well, when I was doing my research, I found that one definition, which I think covers it pretty well, is the use of innovative technologies to create either existing products or new products. And this sort of idea is that advanced manufacturing is adding sort of a new layer of technology, whether it be robotics, AI, or machine learning, or any of these sort of new innovative frontiers to some sort of existing process to sort of increase the efficiency or the productivity, or even create something brand new. And the reason why this is important in this new sort of age is that during the pandemic, a lot of policymakers and governments have realized the importance of having a strong industrial base, manufacturing base. And this is also highlighted by the fact that there's 2/3 of the global supply chain is in manufactured goods. And therefore, having a strong advanced manufacturing sector can be really beneficial for economic gains and also productivity growth and job creation. So just an overview of Australia. In the 1960s, Australia really had its peak sort of manufacturing sector as the size of its GDP, just above a quarter of GDP. And that was primarily in automobile manufacturing and sort of derivatives. However, over time, during increasing market competition, new government policy, macro policy, had led to sort of a slow decline in its share of the GDP to about 5.7%, as sort of manufacturing shifted to other elements such as minerals. And however, currently, the Australian economy still has a very strong manufacturing sector, which still exports around 66% of manufactured exports. And this includes agriculture as well as other sectors. But the key idea and the key message is that innovation is what really, really drives this industry. And without innovation, it's very hard to continue to keep up with global demand and with other businesses. And this is also something that was a strength of Australian businesses, despite some of the challenges that they faced, that Australian businesses were still able to innovate both within the business and to create new products. However, recent surveys from government departments have highlighted the fact that a lot of businesses struggle to find the workforce or capital funding and markets in order to push their products and to continue to grow the sector. And some of these initiatives by the government policy to sort of boost this sector is providing grants, and these are targeted in sort of the new frontiers, like in pharmaceuticals, in agriculture, in minerals, and other sectors as well. And this has been an initiative by the previous administration as well as others as well, to sort of really boost this sector. For Israel is actually quite a leader when it comes to high-tech manufacturing, particularly in sort of software and technologies. This is an initiative policies came from an idea from the Office of the Chief Scientist, now known as the Israel Innovation Authority, which really pushes firms and businesses to take their ideas from the chalkboard into the market. And they use this by trying to address sort of market failures by first attracting research foreign investment and research development from multinational firms to Israel by highlighting their strong workforce and sort of tax incentives. And this has led to huge successes in many firms, such as most notably Waze and as well as Fiverr, just as an example of firms that have really pushed the issue when it comes to technology and that sort of thing. And finally, for the UAE, the economic output has been really focused on hydrocarbons. And it's something that they've done a really big effort to sort of diversify into areas such as construction and tourism. However, with in economies which have a high dependency on a specific resource, it is very likely that they try to diversify something that's very, very close to oil, this resource. So hydrocarbons, even though the manufacturing is something very close to sort of hydrocarbon outputs, oil and gas. And an initiative done by the UAE government to sort of address this has been called Operation 300 Billion, which is designed to really target the manufacturing sector and really improve it, which has been stagnant over the last few years, to really encourage recent developments, upskill the labor force to have the key skills necessary to build a robust and thriving manufacturing sector. And so the recommendations, particularly for Australia, it's mainly building the connection between industry, ensuring that the risk-taking appetite can continue to grow, to continue to drive innovation, and sort of continue to invest in advanced manufacturing ideas and products. For Israel, it's more of continuing development beyond specifically in the IT and information space. Advanced manufacturing can be broadened to other areas to increase robustness and continue being at the front edge of innovation. And for UAE, it's particularly sort of the grassroots, growing the workforce skills, encouraging international firms and multinational corporations to continue to invest and provide sort of the information and capital for firms to research. And so the key takeaway is that the strengths and the weaknesses of each nation can really be, used with each other. Like sharing this sort of knowledge and idea is really key to sort of growing this advanced manufacturing sectors in each respective nation. So the future areas of study, I think, is particularly important, is investigating how the Israel Innovation Authority fosters this high growth in the tech industry. I think what they do is extremely unique and something that is can be analyzed and taken, and the best parts can be taken to be reproduced maybe in in Australia and the UAE as something to drive whatever high-tech sector that they want to push forward. Also, international trade policies is something that both Australia and UAE have also struggled to deal with, in the sense that how international policy, trade policies deal with the manufacturing domestic industries has a huge impact on the future of them for their growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy. You're probably too young to realise this, of course, but when I was the Minister for Innovation, Industry and Science, I appointed Saul Singer to the Australian Innovation Council, of course, who wrote Startup Nation, all about Israel and innovation in areas like advanced manufacturing, which leads me to my question, which is that one of the driving forces in Israel behind advanced manufacturing innovation has been defence industry, particularly in aerospace. Do you think there are opportunities between the UAE, Australia and Israel, particularly now in light of the Abraham Accords, for any cooperation around advanced manufacturing in defence industry outcomes?
Yes, I am aware of the defence sort of blend to it, because Israel does use its defence industry to really push that sort of innovation aspect, as you mentioned. I think there definitely is something that can be collaborate between the two nations. They are both sort of have similar characteristics in terms of their need and desire to sort of build their own sort of defense industries and to use that to develop their own manufacturing industries. So, of course, that's something that definitely can be discussed between the nations.
Yes, well, all three have ambitions to have their own sovereign capability, of course. Do you see opportunity? Have you seen examples of that cooperation in advanced manufacturing yet, or do you think it's too early in the piece between the three countries for any of these opportunities to have been realised?
Well, I think that a lot of the thing about advanced manufacturing is that a lot of it has to do with sort of intellectual property as well. Those sort of issues may have limits maybe the spread of information very, very quickly compared to maybe other industries. But of course, information that they think that all nations can benefit from definitely be some place where they can sort of share it. That's something that I definitely want to do more researching from the defense aspect angle. However, from my research definitely focused primarily on past histories of how we reached to this point, and the future is something that
We're fortunate that both the UAE, Australia and Israel have similar legal systems in terms of their being rooted in the rule of law and equity and equality. So I think that's probably a good start in terms of cooperation between the three.
Yes, of course. UAE and Australia have done something recently as well with sort of the rule of law, having societies are governed by common shared principles for how society should operate. That's definitely something that can definitely be expanded upon in the future.
Yeah, great. And of course, there's lots of synergies between AI and advanced manufacturing. So this is where we can cross-pollinate in some of these research projects. So great. So thank you very much, Timothy. That's terrific. And we're getting towards the end of the session. In fact, I think we're a little bit over time, but that's no reason, Bradley, why you should feel that you have to cut short your presentation, because that would be the last thing I'd want you to do. Bradley Innes is going to present to us on utilising soft power in building stronger tourism. Bradley's currently a student at the ANU, studying a double degree in international relations and Asian studies, majoring in Southeast Asia. Bradley's passions in international relations is reflected in his commitment to local international organisations based in Canberra, a long-standing member of the ACT branch of the Australian Institute of International Affairs, which I was a member of when I was at uni, and has also been involved in the ACT Commonwealth Day Celebration Committee and the Royal Commonwealth Society in the ACT, where he facilitates the Student Day workshop at Government House each year. So Bradley, thank you very much for coming today, and we look forward to your presentation on utilising soft power in promoting stronger tourism.
No, thank you very much as well. And hopefully I can follow up to the calibre of the previous presentation as going last. So I'm going to share my screen as well. And please bear with me as I'm failing a bit with my voice today.
So am I. I've got a nasty chest cold.
Yeah, it's going around a bit, righto. So I won't introduce myself because Chris has already done a fantastic introduction for me. So I'll just start off. So I am really proud to present my paper today in utilising soft power in building a stronger tourism. So the current objectives and plans of the UAE and Israeli tourism sector. Both the UAE and Israeli markets face challenges such as COVID-19 in recent months, which has pushed back some of the prior COVID-19 tourism strategies. The Dubai Tourism Vision 2020s strove to achieve 20 million visitors annually, was pushed back to 2022. Furthermore, Israel was also deeply affected by COVID-19 with the closure of the international borders. However, both states have seen the value in expanding said sector. As for example, the UAE has enacted several policies in recent years to attract more visitors from key areas, such as the Dubai MICE Plan and the Vision 2020. Israel also has seen significant growth, especially between the years 2015 and 2019, where its tourism sector grew by a massive 64.29%. However, after speaking with my internship mentor, David Bierman, I soon came to the realization that the power of previous tourists have in attracting more tourists to their previous host country. States should strive to augment their soft power capabilities by building a welcoming destination for visitors, as previous tourists often become brand ambassadors to their previous host nations amongst their social circles, if they have felt to have a positive experience. Thus, an informal but powerful grassroots campaign is created that helps states overcome potential global perception issues they may have. This conclusion builds off the work of Professor Oy of 2015 that states that former tourists often attempt to aspire, emulate, or tacitly accept the norms, values, and agendas of previous host nations. Therefore, building off this conclusion, I have several potential possibilities that the UAE and Israel could implement if they want to grow their tourism sector. For example, the UAE. The UAE could grow their non-luxury customer capability. It's famously, today, the UAE has many luxury hotels. However, if they were to augment this by building cheaper hotel infrastructure or offering package deals to non-luxury customers, they could potentially build more tourist base that could help the UAE achieve their 23 million that they want to strive to by 2022. Secondly, due to the Dubai MICE Plan, the UAE strives to become the events capital of the world. At the moment, they have many events such as Formula One racing or shopping holidays. If they were to augment this with having music festivals or possibly a bid for the Olympic Games, new crowds of tourists may want to visit the UAE. Lastly, expat-friendly policies. The UAE famously hosts a large number of expats in the UAE. If they were to possibly offer a policy where if the expats were to visit their host country and then bring a certain amount of their nationals, their friends and family home back with them to the UAE could reimburse their flights, possibly making expats another source of advertising for the UAE. Lastly, Israel. Israel is striving on creating more organic experience for visitors to interact with locals to help transfer a greater understanding of Israel's current geopolitical positions. By advertising to developing states, a large percentage of Israel's tourists which visit there every year are religious-orientated tourists. if Israel was to, and furthermore, Israel also, they focused their marketing towards larger population centers such as Dubai, New York, or London. If they were to shift this or broaden their range to states such as in Asia or South America, they could bring in new potential sources of tourists to their country. Finally, with the capitalizing on the post-Abraham Accords, the big one here. If Israel were to market towards their new opened up neighbours in the Middle East, they could also potentially open up to a new source of tourists to their home country. They could advertise on the exotic nature of Israel, the mix of Western, Jewish and Middle Eastern culture, the food and possibly even the alcohol that they drink in Israel could be a sense of tourism for Israel's neighbours. Furthermore, interbelief market, highlighting the religious and cultural similarities that the region possesses with many of Israel's neighbours. In conclusion, my research has found strong correlation between growing a state's self-power capability and growing a state's domestic sector. Excuse me. I therefore strongly encourage all states, including the UAE and Israel, to invest in growing their capabilities. It will surely result in a greater potential for said markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bradley. As a person from South Australia, I've got to say, and having drunk quite a bit of kosher wine and Sabra over the years, I'm not sure about your plan for the Israelis to promote their wine industry.
They're very proud of it, so why not?
I know they are. I know they are. But, you know, when you've had the best, it's very hard to go back to the rest. But anyway, so your definition of soft power, from what I can gather, is people who've had a good experience in somebody else's country, whether it's Australians visiting the UAE or visiting Israel and so forth, and therefore taking back into their home markets a good perception of other people who should travel there.
Correct.
Yeah. Because most soft power is usually defined as government aid programs and things that are designed to promote education and tourism and small loans and things. So I think that's a really interesting extension of the use of soft power, which is people to people.
Well, I believe that people to people are usually a stronger ambassador in promoting these type of norms. Usually, if my friend was to tell me something, I believe them over them because I've already had this trust which is established between people. If my peer or colleague were to travel someplace and then I was looking for a holiday somewhere and they can remind me of the great experience they had in the UAE, the great experience they had in Israel, of course I'd compliment that as a potential destination.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've told a lot of people to go to Israel and the UAE since I've traveled there because I've had such good experiences there. Very different experiences, it must be said. So what do you think are the barriers between that kind of soft power now? What are the hurdles stopping ease of travel between UAE, Australia and Israel? And did you have any recommendations in your report about how they could be dismantled?
Well, when I was looking at, especially with Australia, one of the greatest barriers I kind of find is that Australians might be tended to stick to what they already know. And especially there's such great, locations nearby, which are fairly cheap, the Australian dollar compared to the Filipino peso or the Thai baht is quite cheap and could be seen as a compelling destination for Australians. I understand it's a hard barrier to get over, but UAE is already working on overcoming that barrier. Many Australians travel to Europe every year, and the UAE offers deals. If you were to overnight in the UAE, then you can see how great it is here. You can see that we're a comparable destination to anywhere else in the world. So I believe that's the first barrier to overcome. Trying to unentrench Australians from their habits of staying in the Pacific and staying in Southeast Asia. But I believe it is happening. The tourism sector in Israel, like I said before, had grown by 64.3%. So it is happening. It's just inevitably will happen, just not as fast as what we want to.
And what do you think about ease of access to visas? I know the UAE has a very interesting golden visa program for people who that they want to encourage to be able to come in and out of the country. Israel has a pretty tight, very tight visa requirements. As someone who's travelled there many times, I'm not sure how Australia's compare. Is it easy to get an Australian visa, or is it difficult? And is that an area where we could make it easier between the three countries?
Extremely difficult for outsiders to try and get an Australian visa.
Yeah.
It's usually, it is something that needs to be reformed in Australia, and possibly if I was to write another paper, I could write a thesis on how to reform the Australian visa process. Australia is a very competitive country. Many people, especially in our local region, want to move here because of how thriving our economy is, how great the standards of living is, and how friendly Australians are. But yes, it is quite a barrier, and there are barriers to reform, and that's such as the education sector, where many foreigners wanting to come in usually have to study a degree, or you have to have strict association with a business to come in, which is fair, but more further research needs to be done.
Yeah, I think an ease of visa entry between the three countries would be a very practical outcome of your research paper, and between the three countries, I think would be an example of outcomes, and that's what we want. Well, it's almost, in fact, it's 4 o'clock here in Adelaide, and 4:30 elsewhere, although because of daylight saving time, goodness knows what time it is in Queensland. It's always hard to work out during daylight saving time. But thank you all very much for your presentations, and thank you for taking part in the internship program. You were our very first group, and we really appreciate it. We do seem to have a heavy preponderance of men on this Zoom. So when you speak to your friends and colleagues in universities around Australia, please promote the idea of doing this internship program with a diversity of presenters, because that's what we'd like for the next group. And can I thank you very much for taking the time to be on this AusUABC and AICC webinar this afternoon. It will be published and it's recorded, and hopefully there'll be some outcomes from some of your work. And I hope that we can all stay in touch through the AICC and the AusUABC. And thank you, Aaron, for making it happen. And with that, I'm happy to close the webinar and look forward to meeting you all in person soon.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.